Hello everyone. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. Today, we're going to dive into the heartfelt story of Huyen and Diep, a woman waking up to the quiet morning after an emotional night, torn between love, fear, and the judgment of society. We'll follow her tender moments with her daughter Maya, the warmth of everyday life, and the complicated emotions that come with loving someone who isn't completely free yet. It's a story about vulnerability, courage, and the quiet beauty of finding peace in the midst of uncertainty. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters. The morning light slipped through the wooden door's cracks, casting beams on Huyen's face, still marked with traces of fatigue. She gently opened her eyes, her body aching as if she had just endured a heavy dream. Beside her, the empty bed made her heart sink. Diep had left early, without a single note. Huyen sat up, her gaze drifting aimlessly in the quiet void. Memories of last night flooded back, moments too fleeting, too close, filling her with both warmth and fear. Outside, the cheerful chirping of birds filled the air, but within her, a silent storm raged. Was I wrong? She asked herself. Diep was still not divorced, and the shadow of his former wife lingered like an unhealed wound. Huyen buried her face in her hands, the fear of society's judgment rising sharply, cutting into her heart like a blade. She had been through a broken marriage, endured the whispers of gossip after her divorce. Now, she stood on the brink of that risk again, her feelings for Diep still unnamed, undefined. Was I too hasty? Her inner voice trembled. In the next room, Maya slept soundly. The child's steady breathing made the silence heavier, leaving Huyen feeling utterly alone in the small house. She stood, her steps heavy, as if carrying the weight of the fear crushing her chest. The light outside remained gentle, but it couldn't dispel the darkness in her mind. Huyen looked out at the yard, where Bibi, the dog, lay lazily basking in the sun. Her eyes searched for a sign, a reassurance that everything would be all right. But deep down, she knew no miracle would come unless she found the strength to face it herself. She took a deep breath. The fresh morning air calmed her slightly, though the unease lingered. A new day had begun, but Huyen wasn't ready to step out of last night's unfinished dream. A dream of love mixed with fear, of happiness she hadn't fully grasped and already feared losing. The soft creak of the door's hinges broke the silence. Diep stepped in, carrying a bag of fragrant breakfast. The smell of bread and coffee filled the small house with sudden warmth. He saw Huyen standing quietly by the doorframe, her eyes distant. "What's wrong? You look a bit shy," Diep said, his voice low and warm, as if trying to soothe the turmoil within her. Huyen pressed her lips together, avoiding his gaze. The same question haunted her. He wasn't divorced yet. Was she making a mistake? Diep set the bag on the table and approached, his strong hand gently resting on her shoulder, rubbing softly as if to lift the burden weighing her down. "Don't worry, trust me," he said softly, his voice firm yet tender. He told her about his early morning trip to the market, buying bread for her and candy, and a small gift for Maya for the upcoming Mid-Autumn Festival. "I just want you and Maya to be happy," Diep said with a smile, his eyes shining with simple hope. Huyen listened quietly, a warmth spreading within her, but a corner of her heart still trembled. "You're not divorced yet. What if people find out?" she said, her voice barely audible, as if afraid to hear herself. Dee took her hand, his gaze steady. "I promise I'll sort everything out soon. I don't want you or Maya to face any gossip." His words were like a gentle breeze over a dry field, warm, but leaving a trace of doubt. Huyen nodded slightly, trying to believe, but her eyes drifted back to the door, where the outside world loomed with its invisible judgments. Just then, Bibi bounded over, tail wagging furiously, circling Day's legs as if lightening the mood. Day laughed, bending to pet Bibi before turning to pull Huyen closer. In that fleeting moment, she felt peace. Just a sliver, like fragile sunlight breaking through gray clouds. But sometimes, that was enough to keep believing in tomorrow. The smell of frying sausages filled the small kitchen. Huyen deftly set the table while Dee chuckled, calling out loudly, "Maya, wake up for breakfast, sweetheart." The sound of slippers shuffled in. Maya, hair tousled, yawned widely before her face lit up at the sight of her mid-autumn gift, a sparkling hair clip. "It's so pretty. Thank you, Uncle Day." Her voice chirped brightly. Day smiled warmly, ruffling her hair. "As long as you like it. How about I take you and your mom to the Lantern Festival for mid-autumn?" Huyen stood nearby, smiling at the scene. Her heart warmed unexpectedly. She tied Maya's hair, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from emotion. It had been so long since she'd seen her daughter laugh so freely. Dee talked about his plans to take Maya to the lantern-lit park, glowing brightly every mid-autumn festival. Huyen listened while arranging the plates, her eyes softening as if the morning's worries had melted away. "Eat up, sweetie. Then Uncle D will take you to school." The small kitchen buzzed with life, the sizzle of the pan, Maya's bright laughter, the cheerful clink of dishes. For a moment, Huyen felt this was a real family she'd always longed for. But deep inside, a quiet void remained. Watching Dee gently serve Maya food, she wondered, would this happiness last? When everything was still so uncertain? Bibi lay quietly under the table, tail wagging gently, as if sensing the group's joy. The morning light streamed in, illuminating Maya's radiant face, an image that made Huyen want to believe that no matter what the future held, her daughter's happiness was enough. She looked up at Day and caught his gaze following her. In his eyes was something that made her heart quiver, a silent promise, unspoken. And Huyen smiled. Though she knew challenges lay ahead, at least this morning, amid the aroma of sausages, the sound of her child's laughter, and the warm gaze of the man before her, she felt she was no longer alone. As the afternoon faded, the last rays of sunlight bathed the narrow alley leading to Huyen's house in a golden glow. The sound of children's laughter echoed from a distance. Maya and her friends were playing a lantern parade, her small face radiant under the twinkling light of paper lanterns. Dee stood by the porch, quietly watching the scene, a gentle smile on his lips. In that moment, all worries seemed to dissolve, but Huyen knew that smile held more than simple joy. It carried a silent burden both understood, but neither dared to voice. When Maya ran up, proudly showing Day her rabbit-shaped lantern, he crouched down, his voice tender. "It's beautiful. Did you make it yourself?" "Yes, Mommy helped me glue the ears," Maya chirped, pointing excitedly. Day laughed, his gaze lingering on Huyen's hands, slender fingers with traces of dried glue. A warmth crept into his heart, tinged with an indescribable unease. That evening's dinner filled the house with a sense of peace. The soft clink of spoons against bowls, Maya's chatter about school, and the quiet laughter of Day and Huyen wove together. But amid those seemingly simple moments, Huyen's eyes occasionally drifted, as if trying to chase away an unnamed unease. When Maya was fast asleep, Huyen sat on the porch, gazing at the star-filled sky. The night breeze played with her hair, carrying the faint scent of milk flowers. She heard Dee's footsteps approaching, slow and quiet. "What are you thinking about?" His voice came from behind, low and gentle. Huyen stayed silent, letting out a soft sigh. "I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared that what we have will vanish. Scared that when things aren't clear, we'll end up hurting someone." Dee sat beside her, close enough for his warmth to reach her. He looked into the distance, his voice soft but firm. "I know. And I'm trying to sort everything out. I don't want you to worry anymore." She turned to him, her eyes slightly wet. "But if others find out, they'll say I stole someone's husband. I don't want Maya to be affected." Dee fell silent. He understood. He feared it too. The line between love and wrong was so fragile. But then, he gently took her hand, squeezing it tightly, as if to say, "Trust me this time." The crickets chirped in the night. They sat quietly, only the breeze and their heartbeats blending together. A moment both peaceful and heavy with undercurrents. The next day, Day had to return to the city early for work. Before leaving, he said, "Take care of yourself. Don't worry. I'll call." Huyen nodded, offering a faint smile. But as the door closed, her smile faded. The small house sank back into silence, broken only by Maya's soft humming as she studied inside. At noon, Huyen tidied the room. Day's shirt still hung on the chair, its familiar scent tightening her chest. She folded it carefully, placed it in a paper bag, and sat quietly for a long time. She knew she was falling deeper for him, and that made her fear grow stronger. Her phone buzzed, a message from Dee. "In a meeting. We'll call later." Just a few short words, but they warmed her heart a little. She smiled, replying with a tiny smiley face, as if to reassure herself. That afternoon, Maya dragged her to buy a new lantern. The two wandered through the small market, alive with vendors' calls and laughter. Watching Maya beam as she picked a cat-shaped lantern, Huyen realized perhaps happiness was sometimes as simple as this moment, holding her daughter's hand, finding peace in the fleeting now. That evening, the video called. His face appeared on the screen, slightly tired, but with that familiar smile. "Maya, were you good today?" "Yes. Mommy and I went to the market to buy a mid-autumn lantern." "Good girl. Promise me you'll take care of that lantern, okay?" Huyen watched them talk, a mix of sweetness and a sting in her eyes. When Maya ran off to grab her toys, Dee looked at Huyen, his voice softening. "I miss you." Those three simple words shattered every defense in her heart. She wanted to say she missed him too, but her lips only trembled, unable to form words. For this love, though beautiful, was still surrounded by invisible barriers. After the call, she sat by the window, watching the night lights flicker. Outside, the world buzzed on, but in this room, it was just her and her tangled heart. Days passed, their messages becoming routine. Dee shared his work pressures, while Huyen told him about Maya, Bibi, and quiet coffee mornings. Amid life's complexities, they found a small corner of peace in each other. A week later, Dee texted that he was close to finalizing his divorce. "I want to see you when it's done. This time, no more fear." Huyen read the message, her hands trembling slightly. She didn't know whether to feel joy or worry. For sometimes, when all constraints vanish, the real question arises. Do we have the courage to start over? That night, she couldn't sleep. Memories flashed by. His gaze, his hand holding hers in the windy night, the simple mornings with Maya. She knew this feeling was no longer fleeting. It was real. And she knew, when Dee returned, nothing would ever be the same. In the early morning, Huyen brewed a cup of coffee, standing by the familiar doorframe. The rising sun painted the yard golden. Maya's voice calling for her echoed from inside, and Bibi barked softly, greeting the day. She smiled faintly. Whatever the future held, she would choose to trust her true feelings, the ones that had given her strength to endure those lonely days. Outside, the breeze stirred the leaves, and sunlight dazzled her eyes. Bright, but beautiful. Huyen closed her eyes, took a deep breath, letting her heart rest for a moment. And somewhere, in the morning breeze, she seemed to hear Dee's voice, faint, but full of conviction. I'm back. The story follows Huyen, a divorced woman trying to rebuild her life with Dee, a man who hasn't yet finalized his own divorce. After an emotional night, Huyen wakes up burdened by fear and judgment. Though Day is gentle and caring, bringing warmth to her and her daughter Maya, doubt still lingers in her heart. Together, they share small, intimate moments, a simple breakfast, long work days, and a quiet afternoon at the market. Amid financial struggles and social pressure, Huyen yearns for a true sense of belonging. Through tenderness and hardship, the story explores love, trust, and resilience. The fragile hope that persists even when surrounded by uncertainty. It's a portrait of quiet courage, where the desire for peace and acceptance flickers like a small flame, refusing to die out despite the winds of doubt.